honestly lost count of all the emails and messages from viewers desperate to get relief from the Oregon Employment Office.
I'm like, what is this? Unemployment office, you know?
Meanwhile, she's having the complete opposite problem.
But they're coming in almost every day, at least 2 or 3 at a time.
She's getting stacks of checks that she didn't even apply for.
And some fraudulent payments have gone out.
Oh, and by the way, that's right, Oregon finally started vaccinating its healthcare workers today. And we weren't even the last state to start doing it. We were second to last. Here's the story.
And I'm Dan Haggerty. Hi, this is The Story. We're nothing without you, okay? Your feedback matters so much to this show. It really is what we base most of our coverage on. So please look at the bottom of your screen right here. This is where we list kind of how you can reach out to us. Tweet us using the hashtag HeyDan. Message me on Facebook or Instagram. We're easy to find. Just look us up. Or email thestory@kgw.com. Now, let's be honest. There's really, I think, only one way to start the show tonight, especially considering how we got things going last night.
Shot, 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 everybody! Except for Oregon. They've got nothing.
And I would love to be showing you some video of cheering for Oregon medical workers who are getting their very first shots here in our state, except it hasn't happened yet. What is the holdup exactly? Why is Oregon behind again? Yeah, I know, we really went for it. You're also wondering, what did happen to LMFAO? I mean, it's dropped the biggest song of the summer of 2011 and then dipped out completely. Honestly, respect. But back to the point. Yes, yesterday, 48 states were inoculating their frontline healthcare workers, but Oregon was one of 2 that weren't. But today, our day finally came, and I can finally show you some video of people applauding in Oregon. There you have it. That was at OHSU today at 11 o'clock. One of 3 Oregon hospitals giving frontline healthcare workers that very first vaccination in the entire state, making us the 49th state to start inoculating against COVID-19. Yes, we're number 49. We're number 49. But just so we're clear here, it was not the state's decision to get such a late start. It was actually the hospitals administering these vaccines. They decided wanted to dot their T's and cross their I's or lowercase j's. You get my point. And prioritizing, they say, safety over being first. By the way, the 50th state to start vaccinating, Tennessee. So we can only assume that the vaccines there are super duper safe. And while a vaccine does bring a lot of long-term security to us, it really isn't doing a ton in the short term, is it? Especially for families who haven't worked since March in some cases, or business owners jumping through hoop after hoop after hoop of state regulation. Now, there is progress, we can tell you, on 2 fronts right now. So yesterday we told you about Governor Brown's request to hold a one-day special session Monday to pass an $800 million relief package. Meanwhile, there are some signs also that the federal government is close to agreeing on a $900 billion package of its own. Now, the individual plans haven't been finalized yet. We'll, of course, keep you up to date on that. But the federal package will likely come with another round of stimulus checks. Probably less than that $1,200 that we got first time around, but it's something. But if you listen closely, I think, to the way the Democrats and Republicans are talking about this relief, you can hear some key words that explain the differences.
We made major headway toward hammering out a targeted pandemic relief package that would be able to pass both chambers with bipartisan majorities.
We Democrats would have liked to go considerably further, but this won't be the last time Congress speaks on COVID relief. Right now, we must address this emergency over the short term.
So Republicans want the bill to be focused and targeted. Democrats wanted to pass a giant bill that helps people for a longer period of time. In the end, neither really got what they wanted, but ain't compromise great? I mean, it's something. We're moving forward. Republicans, what they didn't get is they didn't get coronavirus liability protection for businesses, and Democrats didn't get dedicated funding for state and local governments. Those were 2 big sticking points that were left on the cutting room floor, but here we go. Now, as far as Oregon leaders are concerned, there is hope that in some communities, that the legislature is considering an extension of the eviction moratorium because it expires at the end of the year and tens of thousands of Oregonians may face eviction, making those unemployment checks right now more important than they've ever been. And that brings us to our big story. Because It isn't just out-of-work Oregonians who are filing for these unemployment checks. See, it turns out the bad guys, right, the criminals, are trying to game the system and take advantage of the benefits that are keeping so many people afloat right now. And leaders have seen now a record number of fake claims just this month. Now, if that isn't crazy enough, our investigative reporter, Kyla Boshi, learned the state is even paying some of them out.
When unemployment checks started arriving in Amy Anderson's mailbox, she figured it had to be a glitch. She hadn't applied for benefits.
I'm like, what is this? Unemployment office, And then
but the checks just kept coming.
Like 1 or 2 a week, okay, I get it. But they're coming in almost every day, at least 2 or 3 at a time.
Over the past month, the Portland woman says she's received dozens and dozens of envelopes from the state employment department. Each letter lists her home address, but somebody else's name.
So there was checks in their name, there was mail in their name, and then there was these credit card, debit cards coming up in their name.
A public records request found Oregon's employment department has seen a growing number of ID theft cases in the past year, including a record 2,100 cases opened in November alone.
See all that in your mailbox. Yeah, that was definitely a head scratcher.
James Moriarty found his mailbox full of 30 unemployment checks made out to his father-in-law, who never filed for unemployment in Oregon.
He lived, worked, and retired in California.
His father-in-law passed away in 2019, yet the state of Oregon just sent him unemployment checks totaling $12,000, which Moriarty is trying to return.
I just don't understand how someone could miss it at the employment office.
The employment department wouldn't comment on specific cases, but Director David Gerstenfeld admits unemployment insurance has become a target for fraudsters during the pandemic.
Some overpayments have happened and some fraudulent payments have gone out.
The agency has intentionally revealed little about its investigations to avoid tipping off the bad guys. The FBI has suggested this fraud often involves criminals using stolen identities to submit fraudulent unemployment insurance claims online.
We've seen, and other states have seen, some large, sophisticated criminal rings attempting to defraud trust funds as well.
Victims of identity theft often have no idea they've been targeted by cyber criminals who've often bought or stolen their personal data online. KGW used the names on these letters to locate several victims across the state. One man learned his identity had been compromised after being notified by his employer that an unemployment claim had been filed. Payroll flagged the claim as fraudulent and notified the state in late October. He also tried to call the agency repeatedly to warn the claim was bogus. Yet unemployment checks were still sent out in his name. Those checks arrived in Amy Anderson's mailbox in November and December. The state declined to explain how or why this happened. Which leads us to another big unanswered question. Why are all these checks being sent to a stranger?
I cannot even begin to guess. I mean, I like detective work, but this one's got me puzzled.
It's definitely a widespread problem.
Parker Crook of the cybersecurity firm Recorded Future says similar schemes have been uncovered in places like California and Washington. Crooks often use false addresses in hopes of stealing the checks.
Some of these crews will actually set up shop and bounce from state to state for a short time, renting out something like an Airbnb while they try to intercept some of the letters associated with unemployment fraud claims in the mail.
Whatever the scheme, Amy Anderson explains the criminals didn't get anything from her mailbox. It's secure. And she did the right thing by sending the unopened envelopes back to the state of Oregon.
Okay, Kyla Boshi joining us now. What an interesting story. For the sake of people at home, what should they do if they start getting unemployment checks sent to their house for strangers?
Well, most important, report it. You can call the employment department or file a complaint online. Now, several people have said they've been frustrated by the long wait times on the phone. The agency says they know that's a big issue, but also don't open the letters. Mark them fraud or fraudulent. Also return to sender and then send them back to the employment department.
Now, we've been discussing the potential and the reality of fraud when it came to this from the very beginning. I mean, Washington had a big issue with a Nigerian crime ring that ended up stealing a bunch of money. Is there any indication that this may be connected to that or something like that?
We don't know for sure, and we also don't know the scale of this particular fraud. The state isn't releasing data on losses, fearing it may inspire, help other criminals. They suggested, though, the losses are not quite as significant as we've seen in other states, Washington one being one specific example. Part of the reason fraudsters pounced on the state is the state is working so quickly to get money out. It's paid more than $6 billion in benefits since March. So you can understand why it's potentially very ripe for this type of fraud.
What's the state doing to kind of seal up any gaps, to put some new safeguards in place, stuff like that?
Another great question. We asked the state that very question. What type of safeguards, what type of precautions are you taking? They wouldn't answer for security reasons. Several states have implemented a second step, new procedures to help crack down on fraud. Also, the Labor Department put in some new guidelines, also handed out money to states to help combat this fraud, which really is occurring nationwide.
Yeah. All right, Kyle Aboshi. Thanks, sir.
Now, at the risk of beating a dead horse, I do want to talk again for a second about the Red House. That's the home on North Mississippi that was the site of an occupation of protesters mad that the city evicted a BIPOC family, a black and indigenous family that has lived there for generations. The barricades at this point have been lifted, and the family is reportedly in talks with the developer who bought the house at foreclosure auction. But in this months-long saga, this protest, a lot of damage was done to the surrounding Mississippi area, including to this place, the Albina Early Head Start building on Skidmore. If you've driven through downtown Portland recently, you've seen similar tags on the side of the Justice Center. And we were back out there this morning when work crews were painting over that graffiti and trying to clean the place up. Now, that Head Start Center is named after a former Oregon State Senator named Avel Gordley. And we have some video of Senator Gordley in the KGW vault. Now, Senator Gordley was the first black woman to become a state senator in this state. She served from 1997 to 2009, representing North and Northeast Portland. The center on North Skidmore was named in her honor in 2009 to honor her for helping to fund various Head Start programs across the state. Senator Gordley is a true trailblazer in a state that was literally, think about it, founded on the principle that people who looked like she looks, should not be allowed to live here. And even when black people were finally allowed to move and live in this state, redlining made sure that it was only a thin slice of North Portland. People like Senator Gordley should be honored, not desecrated, and I think we can all agree on that. But you have to remember the same roadblocks that Senator Gordley faced as she blazed her historic trail still exist for BIPOC Oregonians. Roadblocks like wage inequality, gentrification, or predatory loans. And we can always disagree, and a lot of people do. It's a big talking point right now about the tactics that people use to target those roadblocks, like when people set up literal roadblocks or deface a center that bears the name of Oregon's first black woman state senator. Now, when the story continues, we have an answer to a big question. Did Thanksgiving actually contribute to the crazy spike in COVID-19 cases that we've seen recently? And my message to a story viewer with a bright future, if you ask me, whose message to us stopped us in our tracks. Welcome back to the story. I got a really great email from a viewer named Peyton. I can't wait to read it for you at the end of the show. We're going to talk about that. But all of your messages and emails drive our coverage top to bottom. So keep sending them our way, thestory@kgw.com, or use that hashtag #HeyDan. Now, I want to continue the show by talking about something that a lot of people were very worried about, and that was Thanksgiving. Health officials at OHA, they warned us for days leading up to the holiday that travel for the holiday and celebrating indoors with big groups could cause serious spikes in coronavirus spread. Well, tomorrow is 3 weeks since Turkey Day, and just yesterday we heard from the top doctor at Multnomah County about just how responsible Thanksgiving get-togethers were for driving up COVID cases. And the answer is not very, apparently. Yeah, there is a spike happening right now. We know that. We've been reporting that, and it's been seen in the numbers. But doctors apparently aren't blaming Thanksgiving specifically. Things are just getting worse. So you might be thinking, weren't Memorial Day and the 4th of July, weren't those parties behind some really big spikes? Well, the county says Memorial Day came as state COVID restrictions were loosening. So things spiked, even though they initially did blame holiday parties. Yet, okay, here we are. We're still told that none of that is going to change the way that we should approach Christmas, and we're going to be hearing the same messages that we heard as we approach Thanksgiving. I do think one big question a lot of people have on top of their minds is about the vaccine, though, and if that could actually make Christmas doable or normal in some way. And the answer is no. The same rules apply. We're still months away from having life back to some semblance of normal. KGW's Pat Doris is on the vaccine beat for us, so I called him up again to find out exactly where we stand tonight.
Okay, Pat Doris, straighten us out here. Let us know the scoop on everything you know. Let's talk about the shipments first. How often are we expected to have new shipments of this vaccine coming into the state?
Well, there's big shipments that are expected a week from now and 2 weeks from now and 3 weeks from now. And I believe in between there'll be smaller shipments, especially once the Moderna vaccine is approved. That'll start going out to the rural areas.
Now, as far as this initial rollout, there have been some questions about how that worked because it only went to some choice few hospitals instead of everybody. So can you explain to people how that process played out and how it's working?
Right. Well, it was decided by the federal government, and it was based basically on whether you had one of these super freezers that could hold the Pfizer vaccine at 70 below Celsius. Most of those are located along the I-5 corridor in the greater Portland area, and that's why they got the vaccine.
I remember you kind of prepping us for that in some of your early reporting. And, speaking of that, you have been following along this process since the beginning, essentially. And I was wondering if anything in this initial rollout you found particularly interesting based on maybe what you assumed would happen leading up to it.
Well, this first group is all the medical people that either work in the hospital, the doctors, the cleaning people, the food people, all that. And I really thought that folks that in that setting would totally embrace this. But yesterday up at Seattle at the University of Washington, we heard the medical director say 90% of my people wanted to get this right away, which means 10% didn't or we're not too sure. And today, the people that we saw on the front lines that were getting the shots are saying, well, I was a little bit nervous about this, but as I researched it, I felt okay. Or, I wasn't sure how this was going to go. And to their credit, they all did go through with it and get the vaccination. But I was surprised that there was some hesitancy. And I guess, when it's your turn and my turn, we'll probably feel that same thing. What exactly is going into me? Yeah. And okay, it's safe, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. Here we go.
That's a good point. Pat Doris, thank you so much for the context and the continued reporting. We'll check back with you soon.
It's my pleasure.
Now, we know there are going to be a lot of questions for people moving forward about this vaccine. Kristen Severance and a team here at KGW have been dedicated to finding those answers for you by working with experts. Kristen's back for us now. Kristen, what are people asking about today?
All right, this is a good question. So several viewers have written in asking if one spouse qualifies for a vaccine. So someone over 65, a doctor or a nurse, would the other spouse who does not fit the qualification criteria also get the vaccine? According to the Oregon Health Authority, because there is currently a very limited quantity of the vaccine for distribution, only those in vulnerable populations, so those healthcare workers, people over 65, people in long-term care facilities, will receive the vaccine in the first phases. This means that spouses and family members of those receiving vaccines will not qualify to receive the vaccine unless they too belong to a priority group.
Okay, interesting. Now look, at the risk of getting too technical here, people have been curious about what exactly is in these vaccines. What are people going to be injecting into their bodies?
Okay. This is going to be technical, but I will make it easy to understand. So both the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines rely on messenger RNA rather than the live virus that caused COVID-19. So this is a type of molecule that transports copies of genetic instructions that cells use to build proteins. Both vaccines use something called lipid nanoparticles, and remember that because that'll come up. I'm not going to have a quiz or anything, but that will come up later. Those lipid nanoparticles will encase and protect the genetic instructions. And the vaccines, this is very interesting to me, also contain salts for acidity reasons, and they also contain common sugar to keep the nanoparticles from sticking together.
Oh, that's simple, huh? Okay, good. I'm glad smart people are working on this stuff for us. Now, I've been reading a lot about the relationship between the vaccine and people who have severe allergies. We saw some adverse reactions as soon as this started going out to people in healthcare as early as the vaccine being administered in the UK. What do we really know about the connection there?
Yeah, is the vaccine safe for people with severe allergies? A lot of people wondering that. I have to warn you, this is a long answer, but we've gotten this question so many times that I really want to give you all the details and all the context here. So the CDC announced that people who have experienced severe reactions to prior vaccines can and should still get the COVID-19 vaccine. But talk to your doctor first about the risks. All vaccine providers should be able to provide medical treatment in the case of an allergic reaction, and they must monitor patients, for for 30 minutes after the shot. You may remember, those 2 healthcare workers in the UK who received the vaccine. They suffered from serious allergic reaction. They have recovered, but the cause of the reactions has yet to be determined. And then on Tuesday in Alaska, a healthcare worker had a similar reaction to the vaccine. That person does not have a history of drug allergies, but it's unclear if they have other allergies. These allergic reactions are being monitored by the federal officials. But it's important to note the thousands and thousands of people who successfully have been vaccinated so far, and the risk of a severe allergic reaction is extremely low. Now, this is also interesting. Unlike some vaccines, both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines do not have preservatives or egg products, which have triggered allergic reactions from other types of vaccines in the past, and people with allergies to food, latex, pollen, any other substances do not need to take special precautions and are recommended to receive the Pfizer vaccine. And Dan, in the U.S., regulators are only recommending against vaccination for people with an allergy to a specific ingredient to the vaccine, like the lipid nanoparticle that we mentioned before, a component in the vaccine.
Interesting. Now, look, I don't remember you ever going to med school, but you certainly sound like an MD during all of this. Can you explain to people a little bit how we're doing this research and how you're coming up with these answers?
That's so nice of you to say, because no, I am clearly not a doctor, but again, we do work with such smart people. We have a team working on all of these answers. Pat Doris is on our team. We work with these 2 brilliant fellows who do a ton of research for us, but we also, check sources, and we cross-check sources. CDC, FDA, we have several doctors, we have health experts we reach out to, and we're very transparent. You can go online. I always make sure to include the sources when I answer these questions. And then if you go to our website right now and read this article, you can see all of the places, we cite our sources, because it's important. It's important to know where we get our information.
Absolutely. It is. Kristen, thank you so much.
You bet.
Now, we get a lot of messages into the story every single night, but few of them really stop us in our tracks. I'm going to read one that stopped me and mine when we finish the story next. I want to give some special attention to an email I got from a viewer named Peyton from Wilsonville. This is her. She's a viewer from Wilsonville, Oregon, as I mentioned. And right now she's a sophomore at the University of Montana and a student intern with Montana Public Radio, where she writes and airs news stories. And she wrote me this recently about this week. And she said, "Hey, Dan, I've been watching the story since it first came out. And I even watch from my house in Montana. Recently, I've been receiving a lot of really rude comments from people regarding how I read newscasts and the writing I do at work. I've seen you read some of the meaner things people have said about your show on the air, and you still look very composed, but I find it really hard not to take mean comments to heart. How do you cope with and move on from receiving really mean comments?" Well, you've come to the right place. I am an expert at being criticized, but I think before we get into that, maybe we should listen to what her work sounds like, what she brings to the table. So viewers of the story, here's Peyton Butler.
10 large Montana hospitals this week are beginning to vaccinate frontline healthcare workers against COVID-19. With Montana News, I'm Peyton Butler.
Good, right? I mean, what are we talking about here? First of all, you sound great. You are on your way, especially for where you are in your very young career. No notes from me. And just so you know, you're not supposed to be as good as the people on this show yet. All right, truly, and a true story for you, to talk about my trajectory a little bit. I actually got fired from my first reporting job for being awful at TV news. My boss at the time called me in and said that, Dan, maybe you should look for a new line of work. I didn't, by the way. I used that comment to fuel me, and here I am with my own show, where strangers routinely write in and tell me to look for a new line of work. See, the truth is, it's never going to stop. What you need to do, really, is learn how to use it. There are 3 things to do with negative people, regardless of how rude they are. You could find the humor, like when a woman approached me when I first started working in this city. I was out with my wife and her sister and my brother-in-law at dinner, and they stopped and said, "Hey, I recognize you." And I puffed out my chest, and they said, "You're the anchor on TV who reads the news like someone's holding a gun to your head," which I still don't truly understand, but it sounds like a negative. Or haters can inspire you. Like when Maggie Vespa clapped back at a viewer who criticized her high-waisted pants and then went on to win the Emmy for Best News Anchor. Or, honestly, they can improve how you do your job. The negative emails that really hurt the most, for me anyway, are the ones that have a little bit of truth behind the nasty delivery. And I think that recognizing true criticism is the best way to get better. That said, Everybody listening, we need good journalists. And trust me, it is tough to learn your job in front of the world. So maybe we should send Peyton a little bit of love. We have her Twitter handle at Peyton C_B. Do we have that to put it on the screen? Can we pop it up somewhere? We don't. It's Peyton C_B. Don't forget to use that hashtag HeyDan if you want to say hi to her. And I do want to close with a quote tonight. And this one isn't just for Peyton. I mean, it's for everybody. I think it was Lincoln maybe who said this. I'm not sure the exact source, but it goes like this. Haters gon' hate. Okay? And that's the way it goes. I have been getting a couple of emails, people wondering why we are making such a big deal about the 24-hour gap between other states starting to inoculate people and us. And I just want to remind everybody that our health officials have been sending out daily reminders of how many people are getting sick and how many people are dying. And I believe yesterday they reported 54. So yesterday they reported 54, and we are going to continue to make every day matter, as they have. Thanks for being with us tonight. That's the story. The news at 6:30 is next.